lot of screens, a lot of love.
No, it seems to be just
Nice.
How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
Good.
Good for Christine. Megan.
So,
Yeah. I've done those issues. I brought water some tissues. Just a lot of change.
I love the color. Cool color. Yeah, the kind of part you walk out there and it's fine. Yeah. Walking through the parking lot.
So, Kristen, you're first. You're first. Tennis. So, Steve.
Yeah. When my last car, it was a big change. Jeeps. It's nice being high. It is. Yeah.
Yeah, there's tissues.
Yeah.
Jim was a good friend of Dad's and Mom's.
Yep. Doors kind of hang open. Sometimes really go in and it goes by.
Then you think they might need a few more chairs.
Every time I see it, it's like for you at the lodge? Where do you normally go?
I haven't been to the lodge, but I got I'm not a big
It's so easy to cheat. Who's coming out on top? As far as sleeping.
Once in a while, she gets up and goes home because she feels scared. Otherwise, we're going to
Is your family?
What?
No. And the first time.
Yes, I'm moving the chair.
It's not just one. We're invited in 2 weeks.
We're just jealous.
Literally.
Well, kind of.
I just wake up. Like, it's interesting because I'm still naturally
Just
like trying to break the ball.
absolutely.
Oh my gosh. I'm glad they can do life of things. I'm sort of doing that. I remember it's hard.
Actually, I have to take Daisy
Wow.
on the bed.
That's your home gym. That's your home gym. You should get like today. So weird and cut ice back.
She can get up to me. She gets up there and puts her feet up like that.
I kind of resist because that's a pretty good exercise.
His face, not hurt.
They have a good
Yeah, but we're good. And his family. Because I'm ready. Because I got She could be 30.
Could I have everyone kind of step in a little closer?
Everyone, if you could.
Death is taken. Our beloved Inga Langsam. And our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence there's lamentation, and in their tears there's loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For Inga's love which united us in life which death cannot sever, for her companionship that we shared a long life's path, and which continues through the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of our heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness, all these are precious remembrances. For all these gifts and more, we give our thanks to God. In this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that brings us the ever-new message of God's nearness. It tells us of our kinship with the Creator, in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. Adonai ro'i lo exar bino sher yaberteni, amemenu cholkina chaleni nefshishabeh. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, and my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. L'kol zaman, ve'et l'chol chevet sachar shemayim, ve'et l'ledet ve'et l'nut, ve'et l'tat ve'et l'kor natua, ve'et l'ifrotz ve'et l'ibnot, ve'et l'ivkot ve'et l'izchok, ve'et tzifrot ve'et l'kol. For everything is a season, and a time for every experience under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to uproot. A time to tear down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to grieve, and a time to dance. A time to throw stones, and a time to gather stones together. A time to seek, and a time to lose, and a time to keep, and a time to let go. A time to tear, and a time to sow. A time to keep silent, and a time to speak. And so we are assembled with our friends in the darkness that has fallen upon them, and we lift up our voices together to the source of life, and we ask for comfort, and we ask for strength. We need light when gloom darkens our lives, and we need fortitude and courage when pain and loss assail us. May we find these in God who preserves from destruction all that is good. And let us find them too in the presence of loving friends who do God's work by binding up the wounds of the stricken. Who among us has not passed through trials and bereavements? And some bear fresh wounds in their hearts, and therefore feel more keenly the kinship of sorrow. Others, whose days of mourning are more remote, still recall the comfort that sympathy brought to their sorrowing hearts. They are sharing of sorrow, and our deeds of solace bring comfort to the loved ones of Inga and Langsam. Lord, you leave us bereft on a lonely way, but you are the living fountain from which our help comes. It is to you the stricken look for comfort and the sorrowing for consolation. We take a moment now for silent reflection and prayer. May the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts. It's lovely when loved ones wish to say words of tribute and honor, and thus have we now. Some people wish to say, share some memories, share the love. Steve, are you first? Yeah.
So,
So I just want to thank everybody for being here to commemorate and celebrate my mother-in-law's life, Inga Langsam. Harvey and Inga moved here 8 years ago, and we were very lucky that a house came on the market right next to ours, so we got to be part of their lives, and they a part of our lives. So, anyway, it's just, we just appreciate the generosity from all of you, the texts, the calls, the meals, the prayers and thoughts, and we just wanted you to know that we love you very much, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
I met Inga for the first time while walking the dog, and she was getting her meal. We introduced ourselves and chatted briefly. Apparently I was a bit standoffish that day, as Ariane told me later. But thankfully she didn't hold it against me, and we quickly became friends. We had long conversations in their driveway when we dropped the kids off from elementary school. We were both old school and how we viewed many aspects of life, including parenting and relationships. Our friendship grew especially during COVID quarantine, when the three of us walked the hood most mornings at an ungodly hour. Those walks saved our sanity during that crazy time. Inga and I continued to walk up until last December. I learned so much about her life, even though I had to ask 20 questions to get one answered. Her favorite topic was Ariane, and what an amazing daughter, mother, and friend she is. I will miss our walks, coffee talks in the kitchen, mani-pedis at Polish, Thanksgivings, brunch at the lodge, lunches at RH Rooftop, dinners at Three Palms, and shopping at Model Citizen, where she always found something I missed and was very honest about how it looked. She was so thoughtful, bringing little gifts, like the lipstick I had complimented her on the week before. I'm wearing it today, Inga. She remembered details I shared about my family and truly cared and would ask questions. Thank you for being a third grandma to Camille. You aren't like family, you are family. Love and miss you much.
Tanis, did we call you up?
By Inga. And there she was. Smart, always dressed to the nines. We know that expression. We think alike. She had a smile that, well, melted a young man's heart, and she was only 21. Along came a beautiful daughter who carried on the Inga tradition. Marshall was a high bar to leap over. When you are lucky and see Inga, hug her. She will hug you back and give you a smile that is a gift, like she is.
I'm reading on behalf of Brenda, caretaker. My dear Ariane, I'm so sorry. Tuesday, April 26, 2022. My heartbeat was calling my name, and my work was done. You remember those 3 smiles I gave you, and my caretaker, Brenda. That was me telling you goodbye, my love. By the way, where did you find Brenda? She was so amazing, like a little angel that just walked in and took care of us, and loved us unconditionally. I love her, Ariane. I loved how she interacted with her job, and most of all, taking care of you. I loved what she did. Oh my, I could go on and on. but I know there's a limit on my speaking, even at my own funeral. I am sure one of your awesome friends referred Brenda, right? Let me take a guess. It was Andrea. I thought so. I know how I love to go visit her at her job at Model Citizen, and Brenda for helping my daughter in an uncontrolled situation. Ariane, thank you for taking care of me during my days of life. I relied on you for everything, and you never complained about it. Thank you so much for being my shining light in the middle of feeling sick and weak. Now that I'm feeling better, I realize how much of a terrible patient I was. And when you were trying to take care of me, thanks for putting up with me and showing me exceptional kindness and love. Thank you for taking my meals and received that type of invite. Every time I needed to vent because of my frustrations, you were always there without any judgment. And I am so grateful for you and for that. Just a couple more things I wanted to say. Lindy, my cousin from Paris, I tried to hold on as long as I could, but Harvey was pulling my leg, saying, "Come on." Therefore, I couldn't wait any longer. To my Marsh, continue to make your grandma proud, as I know you will. Thank you for spending the last 2 nights with me, even though I couldn't speak of it. I felt your warm presence. To my son-in-law, Steve, continue to take care of your family and remember the good memories that we share, especially when you taught me how to drive again. It wasn't so bad. I got it and carried on. To my family, to all my family and friends, thank you for the years of memories we shared and all the visitors that came by to see me my last days. Forever grateful. By now I know beautiful blue eyes Rabbi is anxious to get up and speak now. I think that's you.
It is.
Rabbi, now it's time to make everybody smile and laugh. I know you will.
That's pressure. And actually, we have one steps before the beautiful blue eye.
Not you yet.
Right.
Beautiful blue eyes.
Yes.
Inga was a beautiful woman inside and out. When it came to having children, she stopped at perfection. She was determined, feisty, focused, and devoted. Sound like anyone else we know? While I did not have many times to sit alone with her and talk, when I did, she was always bragging on Ariane, Steve, Marshall, Michael, and Lindy. She was very proud of her family, and you could always see that on her face. We will miss her smile and her laugh, but we are also so glad that she has her voice again and that she has Harvey to share it with.
You? Okay.
So I hadn't planned on speaking today, but I feel like I need to tell everyone about this amazing dream I had on Sunday. I had a chance to visit with Inga last Sunday. Her eyes were closed. She looked like an angel. I could feel her squeezing my hand a bit, a little flutter in the eyes. It was a really precious time for me. I went home and I had a Sunday nap, and I had the most vivid dream. I drove back to Inga's house. I walked up, and Inga was standing there, and she said, Kat, come in. You have to see. Harvey's here." And she was so excited, and she was beaming, as you can imagine. And she said, "Kat, come, you have to see. Harvey's here." I remember that image. I will remember that image in my dream forever. And I know that they are together. So I wanted to share that with everyone because I feel like it is true.
who my mother was, and how she will continue to live on in our hearts. Trying to sum up the life of someone who shaped so many aspects of the person that you are, and who was also your next-door neighbor, is nearly impossible, but I'm going to try. My mother was an exceptional person and parent. She was complex and private, fiercely loyal and loving. She always worked incredibly hard, and she seemed tireless. She was intensely tenacious and kind, but with a keen, critical eye. My mother expected a great deal from others, but never more than she expected from herself. I remember when I was in elementary school, I finished a pretty big project, and I was finally done, and there were some errors in it, some cross-outs on the page. Don't grab my papers. And there were a few you don't like this story, I can tell. There were a few cross-outs on the page, and I showed it to her, and I said, "What do you think? Can I hand it in the way it is?" And she thought for a minute, and she said, "Does it look like you? Do you have marks on your face? If it does, turn it in. It looks like you." Needless to say, I redid the entire project. My mother claimed she did not have a sense of humor, but the sound of her laugh was lovely. My mother loved her family, her friends, gardening, her orchids. Anytime anybody gave me an orchid, I would give it to my mom because she would keep it alive. I'm trying, her orchids, travel, having intense conversations while going for long walks. Mom clocked hundreds and hundreds of miles around the neighborhood and at the beach, all while having conversations about some pretty sticky topics. She was also sensitive and romantic. Her favorite movies were Gone with the Wind and Sound of Music. Her favorite books, Rebecca and Jane Eyre. Sweeping epic stories with stunning, complex romances where love conquered all in the end. My mom never liked to talk about herself. She never wanted the baby blue spotlight, as she called it. Instead, she wanted to help you be ready for the spotlight when it would shine on you. When I look at my mother's story, I realize that key parts of her life mirror the tales that she adored in so many ways. As you may know, my mother's story is a romance, over 63 years with the love of her life. But my mother's story is also one of courage, even if she never would have described herself as courageous. A story of perseverance, family, and about moments that made all the difference. The first part of my mother's story is a wartime harrowing tale of adventure. My mother was born on February 25th, 1935 in Vienna, Austria. Her parents, Alfred and Martha Hanf, owned 2 successful men's clothing stores in Vienna, and they doted on their only child, Inga. Inga's world changed drastically when she was only 4, following the annexation of Austria by the Nazis. A few days after 2 SS officers dragged my grandfather out of his store and made him scrub the sidewalk with a toothbrush, they packed up everything they could carry and fled Austria. Over the next year, they would travel through Czechoslovakia, through Poland, spending time in Krakow, and finally they would arrive in London, England. My mother remembers the air raids and how they would sleep in the subway, and how one morning when they got back to the hotel, the glass atrium was shattered and there was glass everywhere. And just when they thought freedom was within reach, they thought my grandfather was a spy. So they interrogated him and sent him to an internment camp in Australia. And so my grandmother and mother embarked on a ship that took them to the United States and to Boston. And there were 2 sister ships that left at exactly the same time. The other ship was sunk by a U-boat, and basically all of the work was. So again, it's those moments. And they arrived in Boston, they made their way to New York, and there they shared an apartment with my grandmother's sister Olga, her family, and their 2 sons, Eric and Henry, who my mother became their little sister. And the children that were born in Austria all shared a lifelong bond. So there was a happy ending at this point. Life was hard. They had to learn English in a new culture. My grandmother did piecework. She sewed sleeves onto shirts and sweaters and brought them back on the subway at night. And she also cleaned the floors in the building that they lived in. In 1942, they realized my grandfather wasn't a spy and released him and sent him to the United States, where he joined my grandmother and mother And they moved into their own apartment, 1 block away from the cousins, and ultimately opened their own women's clothing store in New York. So again, here, a happy ending to this chapter. The entire Hanfa family worked hard. My mother did well in school in all classes except geometry. And just about every day after school, she would take the subway to the store, do her homework on the subway, and work until about dinner time. My mother had an incredible work ethic, but she never really had a child. She was never able to join a club or hang out with friends after school. But she loved movies and magazines and fashion and the idea of love conquering all. The next part of my mother's story is the fairy tale romance part that you all know. She met the love of her life, Harvey, on January 2nd, 1957, while they both worked for Gimbels as buyers. They were engaged less than 6 weeks later on Valentine's Day and married on June 8th, about 6 months from their first meeting. They then spent 63 years together, built a life, family, successful business. And since retirement, each morning my father would ask my mother, what would my beautiful wife like to do today? And that is exactly what they would do. My mother's story also had both comedy and drama, and the drama is where I come in. My mother was an only child, and as you know, so am I. Growing up, I was very close to my dad. We had the same weird sense of humor, both loved to write stories, and maybe weren't the neatest people in the world. My mom was an exceptionally organized, on-point individual, and she kept us both on track, which we needed but didn't necessarily appreciate. It was only when I got older that I realized in many ways we had excluded my mother. And I took so much of what she did and what she taught me for granted. My mother wanted me not to be like her. When I was in 8th grade, my mom signed me up for shop and not home ec, the only girl in Memorial Junior High that was taking shop. And on top of that, I had never built anything in my life. It was an experience, to say the least, and there's actually probably still not all that happy about being in the shop class. But my mother always meant really well, and I did learn a lot. She wanted me to be strong and independent and be able to support myself and a career. She had found after in our story, less drama and more comedy. I began to truly understand why she pushed me and encouraged me to be different, beginning with my name, and how she really was a great parent. She did everything she could to help shape me into being independent and strong, but also sensitive and loving and relatively grounded. She taught me the importance of family and loyalty. As only children, both my mother and I deeply love and value our core family, our extended family, and our beloved friends who are family, and the other only children in our lives. Mom and Dad loved their son-in-law Stephen and their grandchildren, Michael, Lindy, and Marshall. My mother loved and was loved by so many. When my father passed on March 26, 2021, you knew my mother needed you. Her grief was so wide and so deep that it threatened to pull her under. Thank you to all of you that rallied behind my mother after my father's death and during her illness. Thank you for the calls, the visits, the walks, the invitations to lunch, to trivia night, dinners, parties, trips to the tiki room. And when ALS took my mom's voice, thank you for your patience and for finding beauty and new ways to communicate in the silence. My mom loved and valued all of you, and I will never be able to thank you enough. In some ways, I'm not surprised that my mother passed 1 year and 1 month after the death of her beloved Harvey. Inga was the sensitive, stylish, and strong driving force in her family, in our family. She was a loving and dedicated daughter, wife, mother, grandmother, and friend. Although my mother did not think she was courageous, she truly was. She was a warrior who went to battle over and over again in a new country, in her family's store, for her family, for our family, for my father during his cancer treatments, and every day for those she loved. There are so many stories, and I wish I could share all of them. But we have reached the final chapter. My mom held on as long as she could, but I just think she and my dad could not bear to be apart any longer. I was holding my mom's hand when she passed. And I want you to know, like you heard a minute ago, that she smiled, and she had not smiled in months. She smiled 3 times, and I truly believe that it was either the idea of being reunited with her beloved husband, or it was the fact that she was seeing his face. I told her that it would be okay, that she should go and be with her love, and she should write the next chapter in their love story. I asked her to say hi to Daddy and to tell him we love him and miss him and to thank him for watching over us, and that I knew they had so much to talk about. And she smiled her final smile. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for being part of my mother's story and for being part of the chapters that are yet to come. Yehi Zircha Ru. May her memory be a blessing to us.
Just I'm very, very fond of Inga. And she was a beacon. And so, yeah, so when you guys went away for a little while, she let me come over and visit with her. And no matter what we were talking about, it always came back to the same thing. She kept saying, I have been loved. And I love. I have been loved and I am loved. Always again and again and again. And even when we talked about what she would want as an epitaph on her tombstone, we talked about that too. She asked, do you have one? Do you have one that you want on yours? I said, yes, of course. The same one I've been wanting for years. The Jews killed him. That's what it took the life out of him. But she laughed and thought that I've been loved and I love my being more fitting. And it's an extraordinary thing for a woman to say in such difficult circumstances. But she was surrounded by love. And it healed. She's been loved. She is loved. She will be loved. And that's her. To your care, O God, do we sustain all that is precious to us and to your people. You would give us loved ones and make them the light of our life. And we see light as through windows that open on eternity. We see that love endures and the soul endures as you, God, endures forever. We see that the years are more than grass that withers and more than flowers that fade. This is the dwelling place where love could happen, and those of us who are wise and indulgent. Life goes by so fast. Blink of an eye, maybe the days seem long, but the years pass by so quickly. So one of the lessons I learned from you is to slow it down a little, not to rush on to the next day so quickly, but to be fully present when love is being experienced and love is being given. It's imperative that we be nowhere else but here to receive it. All of us have been recipients of English love for that world. I count myself among them. If you're comfortably able, may I invite you to please rise. Yam leirach amin, sochem b'miramim, hamsem nuchan, nuchan atachak kanfei shekhinah. Im kirishim turim kazar, pi amasi leimet nishma neshach. Shalcha ba'olama, Barachamim Nasireha Besete Karapapa Sword Swacha Chaim and Ispata Adonai Hunacha Yero Fishalom Amiskava Passion God, eternal spirit of peace. Grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence. Who enters eternal. O God of mercy, let it walk like you. In your eternal presence and ever bond, be bound up in the bonds of everlasting life. God is our heritage. May she rest in peace. Let us say. At this juncture, we lower the comments. And then subsequently, we I don't know how to thank you for letting me in and letting me visit with her. And that was a gift. Adonai Natan, Adonai Lakach, Yushem Adonai. God gives, blessed be the name. Yeah, Yushem Adonai. Go your way, the God is calling. Let Adonai Yeh Ma, go thy way, the God is with you. Your righteousness goes before you. And the glory of the Lord is with you. And we repeat now the words hallowed by generations. Kadish, you call in the mourners. Yit Gadal, Yit Kadash, Shabei Rabah, Ahmad, Yivarach, Rukei, Yahweh, Fakutei, Akayaton, Akayaton, Akayed, Akabeit, Israel, Agalal, Istan, Freedi, Yehei, Shemei, Rabba, Neborach, Yolam, Amaya, Amaya, Yitmalach, Yishmalach, Yitmahar, Yitmalach, Yitmaseh, Yitadar, Yitalev, Yitmalach, Shabei, Yitmishal, Yitmishal, Yehei, in Kobrit, Lakab, Yishivaka, Tushkotata, Benechamata, Yam, Iran, Yam, Mavim, Yeshua, Rabba, Vinchimaya, Vihayim, Aleinu, Bion, Ko Yisrael, Vinchimaya, Lusei, Shalom, Vinchimaya, Uya, Sesha, Aleinu, Bion, Ko Yisrael, May the source of peace grant peace to those who mourn, to all who are bereaved. As you might know, a Jewish funeral concludes with a casting of a spadeful of dirt into the grave. It's the custom to invert the shovel when that's done, as a woman who we love and honor. So it first. Now, if I may ask you to form 2 rows so that the mourners can pass in between you. And if you would repeat after me. May God console you with all who mourn in Zion and in Jerusalem. This doesn't always happen this way, but when it does, you're not supposed to family. Like where the roots grow together and you're intertwined. It's so important to this family. And you're here. And you comfort it. And you provide solace. Friendship.
Usually people from the end keep going.
Oh.
Like you guys. Just so you guys can usually people from the end and make a line.
Thank you.